This slideshow covers an incident that happened in the year 2000 about Hugo Chavez, president of Venezuela, visiting Iraq and meeting with Saddam Hussein. And this was a trip and a visit that angered the United States, angered the Clinton administration. Bill Clinton had been president since 1992. It was in his last year, and Chavez's visit ran counter to the policy he had toward Iraq throughout his presidency. Hugo Chavez was elected president of Venezuela in 1998. He was reelected under a new constitution in 2000. He had never run for political office before, had never held an office. He was relatively unknown to the outside world. Also, by being president of Venezuela, he had tremendous authority over the Venezuelan oil company. The president of Venezuela appoints the PDVSA's board of directors and essentially controls the state oil company. And Venezuela was an important major oil exporter, exporting about 2.5 million barrels of oil per day. And those exports were very important to the economy of Venezuela, accounting for about 95% of Venezuela's export earnings. Venezuela was a member of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, one of the founders of OPEC in 1960. There are 11 member countries, and their goal is to essentially control the production of oil in order to achieve a higher price for oil, which was an important factor for Venezuela since so much of their earnings in export markets came from oil. But the last OPEC meeting had been held in 1975. It had been 25 years since they had a heads of state meeting to set OPEC policy. Well, in the year 2000, when Hugo Chavez was reelected as president, Venezuela assumed the rotating presidency of OPEC. The 11 countries rotated the membership. In 2000, it was Venezuela's turn. So essentially, Chavez, by being president of Venezuela, a member of OPEC, controlling the oil company, he was also, in 2000, president of OPEC. So he called for an OPEC meeting in Caracas for later in 2000. There hadn't been an OPEC heads of state meeting since 1975, so Chavez called for one. And he had not met with any of the leaders of OPEC countries previously, and so he set out to visit all of the leaders of OPEC countries in advance of that meeting so he could introduce himself, get to know the foreign leader, as well as explain the purpose of the upcoming meeting in Caracas. So the problem from the United States' standpoint was Chavez's visit with Saddam Hussein, who was president of Iraq. And as you all probably remember, in 1990, Saddam Hussein led an invasion of Kuwait, and Iraqi forces took over the country of Kuwait. And the United States then participated and led a UN force that essentially pushed Iraqi forces out of Kuwait and back into Iraq, known as Desert Storm. The United Nations Security Council then passed several resolutions to sanction and isolate Iraq because of its actions in invading Kuwait. They pushed Iraq out of Kuwait, but then they set out to isolate Iraq in the future because of its actions. And one of the major actions taken against Iraq was Resolution 670 regarding the Baghdad International Airport. In fact, all of the airports in Iraq, nations essentially in the entire UN, were barred from having planes take off from their territory and land in Iraq. By the same token, no plane could take off from Iraq and land in any other country unless the plane was carrying food or medicine and was authorized by the UN. It's a way of isolating Iraq by preventing air travel in and out of the country. The only world leader, senior leader, to visit Iraq for those 9 years was UN's head, Kofi Annan, who in 1998 undertook a peace mission authorized by the UN, and he was allowed to fly into Iraq and meet with Hussein, but he was the only one. So now we have Hugo Chavez's entry into Iraq on August the 9th, 2000. He had visited Iran, which is right next door to Iraq, and basically moved to the Iraqi border and then drove over the border in a car. And thereby doing that, he respected the UN ban on flights to Iraq. He didn't fly into Iraq, he drove in from Iran. And then once across the border, he was flown in a helicopter to Baghdad for a 12-hour visit. Once he was in Baghdad, Chavez was given the red carpet treatment by Saddam Hussein. And Saddam Hussein basically said Chavez's visit was a slap in the face of the United States. And the Iraqi newspapers carried extensive coverage of this, praising Chavez's courage in defying the United States. So essentially, Chavez, being a very new leader, unknown in much of the world, here he is getting some worldwide attention. And the fact that Hussein drove Chavez around Baghdad for a few hours, the video of that went viral. So again, Chavez is getting quite a bit of attention as a world leader playing on the international stage. And here is the article that appeared in the New York Times that essentially had the headline of saying that Chavez's visit to Iraq angered Washington. And the article lays it all out, saying that he was the first head of state to visit the country since the Gulf War. Sharp protests from Washington, the State Department calling it particularly galling, and essentially his visit set off a firestorm in Washington and angered the Clinton administration. But there was an article written, a book written about Chavez by Bart Jones, where he pointed out that there were political scientists that thought that his OPEC tour was masterful. And basically, it demonstrated that Venezuela was not just going to be a Latin American backwater. And despite the State Department's complaints and criticisms, people all over the world, particularly in third world countries, became aware of Hugo Chavez and essentially known more about him than just about anybody else in Latin America except for Fidel Castro. So here you had Hugo Chavez being first elected in 1998, re-elected in 2000, and then taking this trip to Iraq and becoming very, very well known on the world stage. The blog, The Venezuela Reader, has a document on it that essentially lists all of the sources that were used to prepare this case study. And you can access the blog, The Venezuela Reader, to read more about this incident that occurred in 2000.